It was a typical Saturday evening when we arrived at the dinner party hosted by one of my husband's old college friends. The room buzzed with laughter and the faint clink of glasses, but I felt strangely out of place amidst the chatter. My husband, David, was his usual affable self, shaking hands and catching up with everyone. His easy charm always seemed to win people over, though it sometimes left me feeling like a shadow in his glow. I was nursing a glass of wine, making small talk with a woman I barely knew, when a man approached us. He introduced himself as Ryan, a work colleague of David's. Ryan was striking, not in a traditionally handsome way, but there was something magnetic about his presence. His smile was warm, his voice smooth, and his eyes seemed to hold a spark of something unspoken. He greeted me politely before turning to my husband, clapping him on the shoulder with a familiarity that suggested they were more than casual acquaintances. "David's one of the good ones," Ryan said with a grin. "You're lucky to have him." The compliment felt genuine, and for a brief moment, I found myself nodding in agreement. David was good, steadfast, dependable, the kind of man anyone would be proud to call their partner. Yet as I smiled back, a subtle ache lingered, one I hadn't been able to name for some time. Later in the evening, as David drifted into another circle of conversation, Ryan found his way back to me. He leaned in, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You're stunning tonight," he whispered, his words deliberate, lingering in the air like a secret. I froze for a moment, caught off guard by the intimacy of his tone. My first instinct was to laugh it off, but something in his expression stopped me. He wasn't joking. I forced a polite smile, murmured a thank you, and excused myself under the pretense of refilling my drink. My heart was pounding as I moved across the room, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Was it a harmless compliment, or was there more to it? And why did it feel so different from the casual flattery I'd encountered before? I tried to shake off the unease, focusing instead on David's laughter from across the room. He was in his element, so at ease, so unaware of the strange moment that had just unfolded. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, though I couldn't quite meet Ryan's gaze again. His words stayed with me, replaying in my mind like a melody I couldn't forget. As David and I drove home, he asked if I'd enjoyed myself, his tone light and unassuming. I nodded, offering a vague response, though my thoughts were miles away. The whisper had awakened something I couldn't yet define, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps, or a dangerous craving for attention I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The days following the party were a haze of routine, yet Ryan's words lingered in the quiet corners of my mind. I told myself it was meaningless, just a fleeting moment of flattery that I should let go. But it wasn't that simple. Every time I thought of his whisper, a mix of emotions washed over me. Flattery, guilt, and something I couldn't quite name. It was as though he had opened a door to a part of me I didn't know existed. Our paths crossed again sooner than I expected. David invited Ryan to join us for a casual dinner at our home. I was caught off guard by the suggestion but masked my unease with a smile. When Ryan arrived, he was as charming as ever, blending seamlessly into our evening. He praised my cooking with such sincerity that I felt my cheeks flush, though I quickly dismissed it as politeness. Throughout the evening, his presence felt almost too noticeable. He had a way of directing his attention that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. David was oblivious, engrossed in their conversation about work and mutual acquaintances. But I was acutely aware of every glance Ryan cast my way, every subtle inflection in his voice when he spoke to me. The night ended without incident, but the tension remained long after Ryan left. I found myself replaying the moments in my head, dissecting every word and gesture. Was I imagining things, or was there something intentional behind his demeanor? And why couldn't I stop thinking about it? A few weeks later, I ran into Ryan unexpectedly at a local cafe. He greeted me with the same easy charm, and before I knew it, we were seated at a corner table, chatting over coffee. It felt innocent enough, two people passing time. But as the conversation deepened, I realized how effortlessly he could draw me out. He asked about my dreams, my ambitions, things I hadn't even discussed with David in years. There was a moment when he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You're remarkable, you know that," he said, his gaze steady and unflinching. The words hit me like a jolt, stirring something I didn't want to acknowledge. I tried to laugh it off, deflecting with a light-hearted comment, but his expression remained earnest. By the time I left the cafe, my emotions were in turmoil. Ryan hadn't crossed any explicit boundaries, but there was an unspoken energy between us that I couldn't ignore. It felt like I was standing on the edge of something dangerous, and yet I couldn't seem to step away. At home, I found myself unusually quiet. David noticed, asking if everything was okay. I assured him I was just tired, but the truth was far more complicated. For the first time, I felt like I was keeping a secret, not just from David but from myself. The next time I saw Ryan, it was under entirely different circumstances. David had invited a group of colleagues, including Ryan, for a team-building weekend at a nearby resort. The setting was idyllic, a perfect blend of relaxation and professional bonding. I told myself it would be easy to keep my distance, to blend into the background as a supportive spouse. But the moment Ryan arrived, the same tension resurfaced, sharper than before. Throughout the first evening, I avoided being alone with him. He seemed to sense my hesitance, maintaining a polite but measured distance. Still, his occasional glances were hard to ignore. By the second day, however, circumstances forced us into proximity. A group activity required us to pair up, and by chance, or perhaps design, we ended up together. The task was trivial, but the proximity wasn't. As we worked side by side, our conversations became increasingly personal. He mentioned his own struggles, his loneliness, and the challenges of balancing ambition with connection. His vulnerability caught me off guard, making him seem less like the confident figure I'd built up in my mind and more like a man searching for meaning. At one point, we were separated from the group momentarily, standing by the edge of a serene lake. The air between us felt heavy with unspoken words. Ryan turned to me, his expression serious but not predatory. "I know I've complicated things," he said quietly, "but I can't ignore what I feel when I'm around you." His words hit me like a tidal wave. For a moment, I was speechless, caught between the allure of his confession and the reality of my life. I managed a response, my voice trembling. "This can't happen," I said, more to myself than to him. He nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I know. But that doesn't make it any less real." The rest of the day passed in a blur, but the moment by the lake stayed with me. I felt a strange mixture of guilt and exhilaration, as though I'd been given a glimpse into an alternate reality where choices were easier and consequences didn't exist. That evening, David noticed my distraction. He asked if I was feeling all right, his concern genuine. I reassured him, but my heart felt heavy with the weight of my own dishonesty. Ryan hadn't crossed any physical line, and neither had I. But emotionally, I was treading on dangerous ground, and I knew it. As I lay awake that night, I wrestled with my emotions. Ryan's words had stirred something within me, a longing for a connection that felt raw and untamed. But I couldn't ignore the cost. The thought of betraying David, of shattering the trust we'd built, was unbearable. And yet, the part of me that had responded to Ryan's attention refused to be silenced. I was trapped in a conflict of my own making, unsure of how to find my way back. The days following the retreat were a whirlwind of emotions. I avoided Ryan completely, ignoring his texts and steering clear of any events where I knew he'd be present. Yet, his words stayed with me, echoing in the quiet moments when I was alone. I knew I had to make a decision, one that would either close the chapter or tear everything apart. One evening, while David was working late, I found myself scrolling through photos from the retreat. Among them was a candid shot of David laughing with his colleagues. His face was lit up with an easy joy, a reminder of the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Guilt twisted in my chest, sharp and unrelenting. How had I let things get this far? I decided to confront my feelings head-on. The next day, I messaged Ryan and asked to meet in a neutral public space. When we sat down, I didn't let him speak first. "This has to end," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. He looked at me with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "I never meant to make things difficult for you," he said. But I couldn't ignore how I felt. "I can't either," I admitted. "But it doesn't change the fact that this is wrong. I love my husband, Ryan. And I can't betray that, no matter how complicated things feel right now." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "You're stronger than I thought," he said, a hint of a smile on his lips. "I'll respect your decision. I always did admire your loyalty to him." We parted ways without another word, the weight of our unspoken connection lingering like a shadow. As I walked away, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. It was as though I'd closed a door on a part of myself I hadn't known existed, but in doing so, I'd also reaffirmed what truly mattered. When I got home, David was waiting for me with his usual warmth and a quiet smile. He pulled me into a hug, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to fully embrace him without reservation. In his arms, I found the clarity I'd been searching for. That night we talked long into the hours, not about Ryan or the retreat but about us. I shared things I hadn't said in years. My fears, my dreams, the parts of me that had started to feel invisible. David listened, his attention unwavering, his love undeniable. As we drifted off to sleep, I realized the whisper that had once unsettled me no longer held power. It was nothing more than a fleeting temptation, a reminder of the fragility of human emotions. What mattered was the choice I'd made, the choice to fight for what I already had, to nurture the bond that had been the foundation of my life. In the end, love was not just a feeling but a commitment, one that I intended to honor with every part of myself.